Judge Burns, this is really exciting for me because we're having a chance to talk about your career, your life. You've just done some really wonderful things on the bench.
Okay.
And when you retired, you'd had 38 years on the bench in the 13th Judicial District, the longest seated judge, I think, in the Tennessee Judicial Conference at that time. That is quite a career. And you didn't start out as an attorney, right?
No, I didn't.
So tell me about how you got into being an attorney.
Well, I was at the hospital at the time as the administrator, and realized that I needed to get advanced degrees to make progress in the hospital world, and needed to go to graduate school, and then I would probably be moving around from place to place, as the life expectancy of a hospital administrator is somewhat limited.
Right.
And so, short rather. And so I thought, well, what can I do to live in Cookeville? Because I had married a lovely lady from Cookeville and wanted to live here, and we did want to continue to live here. She had been away and had come back to Cookeville. So I decided, well, I can go to law school maybe. Maybe I can make a living.
Right.
And so I told the board that I was resigning, and then I went down and took the LSAT, which was probably in the wrong order, but and somehow it worked, and I got in and ended up back in Cookeville practicing.
You were 33 at the time when you went to law school, is that right?
Yes, or graduated, I think.
Right. Graduated from law school. That had to be quite a career move, but at the same time, I would assume as a hospital administrator, you have to make some pretty tough decisions.
Well, yes. I would say in those days, not nearly as tough as today's world in the hospital business. The hospital has grown significantly, obviously.
Right.
And so it was pretty tough, but it wasn't that difficult. Someone asked me not long ago, how is it you could run a hospital? I said, well, there's a different world back in my day. And, but today is much more complex.
Right. Well, in your 38-year history on the bench, because you need to share with us how you really went from being an attorney, practicing in private practice, to being on the bench, and then what has that been like for you? Obviously you liked it.
Well, I did, and it was interesting at the time. The judge who was on the seat, in the seat that I eventually obtained, took disability illness for a few months, and so there was a temporary appointment made, and I was fortunate enough to get that appointment. Some lawyers, in fact, very prominent lawyers in town, had called me and said, we want you to try to get this temporary appointment. And I thought it was rather foolish. Only 3 years out of law school, but with their encouragement and the encouragement of Tom Hale, who was a circuit judge here, and others, I sought that temporary appointment, and it was obtained. And then I served for 4 months, and then the judge got sick, came back, and then 5 months later he had a heart attack.
Oh, no.
So he had another disability, and so I naturally called the governor's office and said, do you remember me? I've helped you once.
Right.
And so they called back and said, in fact, the governor called and said, I answered the phone on a Friday afternoon. He said, Leon, Ray Blanton here. Can you be in Lebanon Monday morning to hold court? And I said, yes, sir, I'll be there. So I've been there ever since, so to speak. Until
What did you like about it?
Well, I don't know exactly. Didn't have any particular thing. It was you have some tendency to want to help people, but at the same time you have to dispense with the retribution that society requires for wrongdoing, and so it was interesting and work, and I really enjoyed all the people that you come in contact with that are maybe not the defendants.
Right.
Some of them were certainly awfully good people and made bad choices, but there were lawyers, the clerks, the law enforcement, and all the people that, it's just fun traveling around. We had 9 counties in those days. Wow. So Wilson County was Macon County, Trousdale, those lower counties we call them, were in the district, and so it was sort of fun. Where'd I go today? You know, just go off in different directions.
And as it changed, did you still travel a lot?
Well, in 1984, well, in 77, then we changed the district, because 76 was when I came back on the bench. 77, the district was changed to only be 6 counties instead of the 9. And then in 84, we added 1 county, so we now have 7 counties in the judicial district.
So you loved Cookeville, though, right?
Oh,
you
yes,
loved living
yeah.
here. And how did you actually get to Cookeville?
Well, I came as a student at Tennessee Tech back in 1954, and Mutt Quillen, we call him Mutt, M.B. Malcolm Quillen, was our high school football coach. I was a manager, and he got a job as the assistant for Wilburn Tucker when Wilburn Tucker was named head coach here at Tech that same year, and so it was sort of natural for me to follow along, and of course think the world of Mutt Quillen. He was just a super guy. And so sort of came up here and started with that, and then finished finally, and then and then worked for Joe Adams in Adams Plastics when I first came as a freshman, putting face guards on Tech helmets. And so I got to know Joe and his family, and then after, I didn't work for him all through college, but first couple of years, and then after a couple of years in the service, after graduation, then I actually was just visiting someone here in Cookeville and happened to meet Joe at the restaurant for lunch. He was there, I happened to be there. He said, "Come see me. I'm in a new building." That's the building that they are presently occupying in Adams Plastics at Jefferson. So I went by, and after some discussion, he offered me a job. I said, "Well, I'll let you know." I went to Texas, where I thought I wanted to start, and I called him and said, "I believe I'll take the job."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, how long will it take you to get back to Cookeville?" And I said, "Well, this was like a Wednesday." I said, "How about Monday?" He called back later in the afternoon and said, "Stay there. Sonny Allen is heading to California. He'll pick you up in Texas."
Oh, how funny.
So Sonny Allen picked me up in a Ford Fairlane Falcon station wagon with no air conditioning, south of Fort Worth, and we went to California and went to a sporting goods show. And we worked California, called on several dealers, sporting goods stores, went to the show, and then started back home. He dropped me off in Texas. He came on home, and I followed him the next day.
You've had quite a varied career until you got on the bench, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Been fun.
You know, you have been really recognized by your peers as a leader. You have served as the trial judge representative on the Tennessee Sentencing Commission, you've served on the Tennessee Commission for Criminal Justice and the Tennessee Supreme Court Advisory Commission for Rules and Criminal Procedure. Did you ever want to serve outside of this 13th Judicial District? Have you ever wanted?
Well, at one time I thought I would like to spend the latter part of the career on the appellate level. But then that notion passed quickly, because I thought, well, that's like writing 5 research papers a week or something like that at college. I said, no, I don't want to do that.
Right.
Because you lose contact with the people, in the sense that you're working behind a desk reading a transcript, doing legal research, which is not what I really enjoy about the legal profession or being a judge.
Right.
The interaction with the people and contact with them is what I enjoy.
How did you see our court system change, the criminal court system change over your 38 years?
Well, I'm not sure. We sort of stuck in a rut doing the same sort of procedurally. Well, we do have new rules of procedure since I came on, but change in the sense of the volume of cases, the types of cases, the improvement in many ways in law enforcement, improvement in the legal profession, improvement with the level of the clerks, and so forth. So it's been interesting to watch that. Hopefully there's been some improvement in the judging along the way, but it's been sort of interesting to watch all of that.
What kinds of cases have you seen sort of change?
Well, the drug cases, as we mentioned, have changed in that in years past. At the beginning, marijuana was, the evil drug. Today, it's certainly not considered that in many parts of the country, but and eventually, I suppose, it will be legal, small amounts or whatever, but it's not now, and so we deal with that. But that was a big thing then. Today it's not. Cocaine and prescription drugs are the big problem today. There's so many prescription drug users, and prescription drugs are just rampant. Everybody, many of them get prescriptions for drugs that I can't really say how they get them, but
right.
we have had people go to the doctor, get a prescription in a large quantity, and they may take one a day and sell 3 a day, or something like that.
Right.
So,
how do you see that changing? Do you see a way to change that?
Well, I think there is some movement to pressure the prescription process. And there is a statute in Tennessee that suggests to the medical profession that they shall prescribe these drugs if a patient comes in complaining of certain levels of pain. I'm not sure exactly. So there is a movement to try to change that statute from shall to may. And that might be a start. I would hope that they'd be able to do that. And I don't know how much someone hurts and how much hydrocodone they need or Percocets, but there seems to be a huge quantity of it. Just obtaining in the legal way, other than the black market way or the illegal contraband drugs coming in from Florida, Mexico, or wherever.
All right. Are there cases that kind of stand out for you? I know you've had such a long career. Are there things that you could talk about?
Well, I in a previous discussion with someone about a case of first death penalty case, those are always tough to handle because you sense the responsibility greater in the fact that potentially someone could be put to death by rulings that you have made. And so the first death penalty case was a case here in Putnam County. The young child, was 9 years old, I believe, was alleged to have been beaten to death or strangled, or I don't remember exactly, but the body then was thrown over a cliff up in Pickett County. And so the stepfather was accused, and then that death penalty case, I guess it was within the first year after I was on the bench.
Wow.
So that sort of sticks with you. I suppose the comforting thing to me, starting off with a big death penalty case, knowing that at that time, Tennessee death penalty was still viable, but it had been determined to be unconstitutional in Georgia, a very similar worded statute. So I felt like even though we might end up with a death penalty, that the chances of this individual being put to death were not going to happen, because I felt sure that U.S. Supreme Court would change our statute as they had in Georgia, not change it, but rule it to be unconstitutional. Right. So that was the case, and also brought up a evidentiary issue as to whether or not the spouse could testify against the husband, and a spousal privilege legal question on admission of the evidence. So I could not find any legal precedent that said the spouse could testify against the husband, but I read something overnight kind of thing, did some quick research, and someone helped find the book, and we read the research, that when there's a crime committed against the spouse's child, certainly the spouse should be allowed to testify against the perpetrator. And so that was the ruling I made, and that was affirmed, although that was the first impression of first time that had been actually ruled on in Tennessee. So that you don't often do that sort of thing.
No, because that really changed. That really changed some.
Unfortunately, that issue doesn't come up often.
Right.
But it did change. It did set a precedent. Yeah.
Is it difficult to make a decision? Is there a weight to making a weight, like a heaviness to making a decision?
Not often. I mean, it's not to say that it's routine when you put people in prison or something like that, but usually when you're at the level of making a decision of prison or not prison, it can be weighty, but many times, of course, they've made that decision for you. I suppose the most difficult decision that I made in the career that I remember was a murder case that actually occurred in Clay County, but we moved it to Putnam County for a change of venue. The jury found the woman guilty of killing her husband. And part of the responsibility of a judge is to determine whether or not the weight of the evidence is sufficient to support a conviction, and also whether the evidence is sufficient. In other words, are all the elements proven? And then you consider the weight of it, which means basically the veracity of the witnesses. If the witnesses are not believable, then the judge has the authority to set aside the verdict, just on the fact that the judge doesn't believe those witnesses.
Right.
If the jury believes them and convicts, that proves the case if you believe them, so to speak. And so in that particular case, the jury had found the defendant guilty. There were some issues in there about the testimony that bothered me, and after the conviction, of course, the defendant went into custody, and a motion for new trial was made immediately, and or judgment of acquittal, motion for judgment of acquittal, which is the judge's rule on whether or not you were testing the evidence, proving the evidence. And after about 30 days, it just really weighed on me, and I finally made the decision that I was not comfortable with the evidence, that there was some evidence that I didn't believe. And so I set aside the verdict. And the state appealed, and it was affirmed, and they did not, of course, get to retry it. But at any rate, they could have maybe, but they didn't. So that one was tough.
Right, right.
Generally, they're not that difficult.
Right, right. Did you ever have any humorous moments?
Oh, yes. And sad moments, obviously. I can't think of any particular humorous, but occasionally something would happen that, everybody burst out laughing. But I suppose it wasn't humorous, but one day in White County, on the 3rd floor, someone was brought out of the holding cell to my left and started running and went straight to the back window and went out the window.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, just, and didn't kill him,
Wow,
busted his ankles.
No, no.
But
I guess he was trying to kill himself, right?
It wasn't, I'm not sure. I think he thought he was on the 2nd floor.
Oh.
Because he had attended court on the 2nd floor before.
So he thought he could maybe get away,
This
right?
was the first time on the top floor.
Oh my goodness.
Or maybe not, I don't remember. But I think that's probably what he was thinking. But it wasn't humorous, but then it's something you could laugh about a little bit later.
Right.
But yeah, there have been some humorous things.
You know, you have a wonderful family. You want to tell a little bit about your
Thank you.
family and what you like to do?
Well, basically, I married Ann Cox, who is from here, and we had 2 lovely girls, one of whom is deceased with breast cancer, and Ann is deceased with brain cancer, unfortunately. And then Claire, the youngest, is 37, I think now, living in New York City, and she's enjoying the big lights and working hard, and you can never make enough money in New York, but she's enjoying living there. But then I was blessed to remarry to Julie Lane, and so we've had a wonderful life and being together. And we've been married 5 years and dated a few years before that, and we've done some great traveling and hiking. We have basically taken hiking vacations for several years, and so we've enjoyed that and visiting other parts of the world.
So do you anticipate your retirement's going to be filled with travel and hiking?
Well, some travel, but only can afford some, not much. But we do have a trip planned later this year to Canada and do a road trip in Canada, northeastern Canada. And we are hopeful to do some more hiking, but as age creeps up on us, I'm not sure how much more that we can do.
Well, you're very active. I think
it's
very impressive. Yeah. You're in great physical shape, and I know that you work at that, so that's great.
We'll try to.
Yeah. I would think as a child or as a young person, it would be very intimidating if your dad was a judge. Was it tough on your kids to have you as a?
No, you'll have to ask them. I don't know.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was hard, but they were not coming to court much, and
Right.
I guess, in fact, I'm not sure that Claire ever really came, maybe once or twice, and so maybe I'm not sure how they felt
Yeah.
about it.
Did they ever have to defend themselves at home?
Well, of course they did, but they admirably they did well.
That's great. That's great. You know, on a personal note, it would be tough to be so touched by cancer as you have been in your life. That has to be really. How do you move beyond that?
Well, it's something that's with you every day, and you just you move on.
Yeah.
You have to sort of keep going. Maybe this may not be appropriate, but I had a juror ask for her daughter to be relieved from jury duty. No, it wasn't the juror who asked. The juror was the young lady who was called for jury duty. Her mother wanted her to be excused because they had lost their father and husband just not too many months before. And she was saying she hasn't had a chance to grieve. And I thought, well, you know, you just can grieve so much and you don't need to be overwhelmed with grief. You have to move on. You deal with it. And so in that period of time of a short, I lost my wife, my mother, my sister, and my daughter.
Wow.
And I told her that, and I said, you know, we have to move on. And so it's with you. You don't forget it. Sometimes you just tune up for no reason other than just thinking about it.
Sure. Sure.
And so you just move on. You have to.
You know, you have to be looking forward to this retirement. I guess you'll get to see Claire, get to make some trips to New York.
Hopefully.
Do some things that you've wanted to do. But I understand that you're not giving up work, that you're still going to be doing some work.
I'm thinking about it. I am doing some picking up from loose ends from what we had left behind before the term. Other than that, there may be some appointments to fill in here and there. So we'll try to do that. And hopefully, I've been considering seeking a part-time job, and that has not developed yet, so we'll have to wait and see what happens.
You know, television's always an option, right? You think we could do it? You know, we talked about that one time about maybe what would it look like to have a court TV, right?
Well, that's nice. I suppose I could carry the cable for these camera people, but other than that, that'd be my qualifications.
Just in the few minutes we have left, what advice would you give? We've got some new young judges coming in. What advice would you give them?
Well, just treat everybody right, do the right thing. Be fair. I was told when I first came on not get carried away with myself, and we always joke about some people go on the bench and get robe fever. We refer to it and get carried away, and it's just not my nature or my style, so it wasn't a problem for me in that regard, I don't think. But you just work hard at it. It's not easy. You need to stay ahead of everybody. You need to work, study, and just be as fair as you can to everybody, and treat everybody with respect, and it'll work.
Sounds like great advice, no matter what you do.
Yeah,
that
right.
sounds like great advice.
Right.
Well, I just wish you the best. I think you're going
Thank
to
you.
just enjoy this time.
Thank you.
And
We appreciate what you do here with the station.
Well, thank you. And you know, I just want to thank you for your service, because what you've done is tremendous service.
Well,
and thank you for that.
You're very kind. Thank you. Thank you.